Hi there, I am Tyler Esselman.
And I am Michael Osinski.
And this is This One Goes to 11.
It's a podcast where we invite a friend or compatriot or comrade who really likes music the way that we do to share with us an album that they believe is perfect.
So perfect, in fact, Michael. So perfect that 10 out of 10 just isn't good enough. Doesn't cut the mustard.
Just breaks the scale.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This week, we're talking to Damien Figueras. Damien Figueras is the definition of multi-hyphenate. Based in Philadelphia, he is a Barrymore Award-nominated sound designer, a composer, a music director, a film and video editor, a director, a deviser, a producer, and sometimes an actor. He's a resident of the ensemble theater collective Apartment 20. He's my go-to collaborator whenever I'm directing something, online or in person, though preferably the latter. He provided the music for this very podcast, and it's a big and, he convinced me to give Billie Eilish another listen. So that's Damien.
That's big. You know, Billie just needs a second chance with you. Billie just needs...
Is that all she needs? Is that all she needs?
She just needs a second chance. That's all it takes.
But we're not going to talk about Billie Eilish this week. We're going to talk about someone else.
Right.
And I think very few people will have an argument with the album that we're going to be talking about this week. Not to give away too much, but
no, I think you're right, though. That's a good feeling.
Yeah. So let's hear what Damien has to say.
Okay, so hello, Damien.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going quite well. It's a beautiful day in Los Angeles here.
You're in Los Angeles. It's great in Philly. I mean, it's a little overcast, but the temperature's nice.
not like a. I mean, the climate of Philly, I don't really have a good sense of what the overall climate is there because when I was there, it was just June, and it was hot and smelly. Love Philly. It's kind of a smelly city. You gotta.
Yeah, it's always smelly. It doesn't have to be summer.
Yeah. It's just worse in summer.
We welcome you to This One Goes to 11. The tribunal has summoned you, Damien, and I hope that you're ready. I hope that you feel prepared.
Yeah, I think I am.
Okay.
Well, the question then, Damien, is what album hath thou brought before this tribunal?
Yeah, all right. So I brought Tapestry by Carole King.
Man, Ms. King herself.
Oh, yeah.
You know what's something funny about her name change because she was born Carole Klein, and then changed it to King because it's more showbiz, But the other interesting thing is I noticed she added an E to Carol, and her given name was Carol.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Got to stand out somehow. I don't know.
I guess so.
It's got to be different.
It's more of a vibe thing. Like the E adds a different vibe than having no E on Carol.
Yeah. No E says I'm not an artist. Add an E says I'm an artist.
Also, I mean, I feel like she had to do anything she could to stand out in an industry where, like to be a female songwriter during that era, like,
right.
To even get any credit. I mean, we don't need to go through the whole plot of Beautiful the musical right now, but I'm sure that will come up at some point.
Yeah.
My favorite jukebox musical.
Well, something we like to do before we get started, Damien, just so you know, is to give our listeners, in case they've been living under a rock and haven't heard of Carole King or heard any song off the album Tapestry, because I think it's sort of impossible for that to happen. We like to give our listeners a little intro, which we like to call a beginner's guide to Carole King's Tapestry in 60 seconds. And Tyler is going to take the reins on this one.
Yep, I am. This was quite the task. It's quite the task to condense this woman's life into 60 seconds. So I don't feel I'm gonna put it right out there that I'm not feeling super confident about my ability to do this in just 60 seconds. But
oh man,
we'll see.
Best of luck.
We'll see. Yeah, I gave myself a challenge.
And Damien, you get the opportunity, because since we're going to be evaluating the case that you make over the course of this episode, you get the opportunity to evaluate how Tyler does.
Oh, great. Cool.
And you can use whatever sort of scoring system you want. You'll find that we use a very incredibly scientific,
super scientific,
very tested scoring system.
Peer reviewed. There's
been
yeah.
Review. I mean, yeah, it's been published in like 18 different scholarly journals. It's pretty.
Oh, sure.
Pretty
Yeah.
It's the industry standard if we're being totally honest.
So just keep that in mind. Tyler, are you ready for this?
Yes, I think I'm ready.
Doing your link later. All right.
Yeah, touch of sound. Whoa.
Touch of sound. Okay. All right. Standing by. 3, 2, 1, go.
Let's talk about Miss King. Born Carole Joan Klein in Manhattan in February of 1942, Carole showed a deep musical prowess from an early age. She cut her teeth on the piano, sitting on a stack of phone books alongside her mother so she could reach the keys. Her career in music started in earnest as songwriter with her husband Jerry Goffin at the famous Brill Building in New York. They wrote such classics as The Locomotion, One Fine Day, and You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman. Though other artists recorded these songs at the time, King would record many of them herself later as she grew into a powerful, emotional recording artist in her own right. That era of King's life was marked by her relocation to Laurel Canyon in Los Angeles, where she communed with kindred musical spirits in James Taylor and Joni Mitchell. And finally, we come to Tapestry, the second album King released under her own name. It featured new songs as well as reimaginings of several hits she had previously written for others. The intimacy of the songs paired with King's unadorned musical power made for a record that has become one of the best-selling albums of all time.
All right, wow. That's a lot, and that's like barely scratching the surface.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So, Damien, how do you think he did? What score do you give Mr. Esselman for that 60-second intro?
Yeah, I would give an 8 out of 10. Wow. I think it did a really great job summarizing up until Tapestry. I think there's a lot about her life and legacy that lives on past that. But I know that we're talking about the album Tapestry today, so I feel like that's a good stopping place.
And that's of course was my intention to just give you the springboard that you needed, and so that in a way speaks to the quality of this recap as well.
Right, it was solid. Great.
Okay, cool. So 8 out of 10. I appreciate that. Cool. 8 out of 10
now
on the board.
From like a scientific standpoint, how do we score him on this? What is your scientific method you got going on here?
Well, you'll discover it as we go. It's the sort of thing we prefer a more sort of holistic learning approach. So I think you should learn it as you go. Yeah.
You will intuit it very quickly. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, very Montessori. So
love it. Great.
Yeah.
We're super Montessori around here.
So, Damien, why don't you start by telling us how you discovered this album?
Yeah, so that's tricky because I can't pinpoint one specific time where I've discovered the album, and I think partly because almost every song in this album, if not every song in this album, is incredibly popular and could stand completely on its own. And I think that like growing up, I have distinct memories with like each of these songs. So like things like I Feel the Earth Move, like which is like top of the album there. I very much remember like as a kid listening to that and just having like a very vivid experience of like, I don't know, like a rainy fall day, just hearing that being played by my mom on like the radio or something. Yeah. So it's, I don't know. I associate it a lot with my childhood just because like, I remember it playing in the house a lot. Which is not like neither of my parents were big like Carole King fans. So it wasn't like, oh, we listened to all of her music and that's how it was. It was just, this is an album and the songs on this album are things that I just remember being very much on repeat growing up. Thinking about like popular TV shows while I was growing up, like Gilmore Girls, for example, which I'm sure you can't like talk about this album and the music on it without talking about Gilmore Girls.
It would be illegal to not speak about her influence on that.
Yeah. So like her music was very much in Gilmore Girls. She also had a cameo in Gilmore Girls. Like that was just like, I don't know. It's like she's always been around. It's like that kind of thing.
One of the interesting things that I got to get a fuller view on in doing a little prep for this album is how that song Where You Lead, they kind of rewrote it in the Gilmore Girls era. Yeah. Because I guess it didn't sort of jive with what she was feeling about women's liberation and feminism, and like lyrically didn't kind of fit what she believed anymore. And so they redid. I just think that's cool. That's somebody who's kind of revising over time to fit the moment in which a song is reaching an audience.
Absolutely. I mean, and this album also has gone through several revisions and remasters at this point. I think there have been at least one or two major remasters of the album that have come out since its initial release, which again is just putting it again at like the forefront of our like pop culture and music. It's just always been there and will always be there, is how it kind of feels.
Can you, well, I mean, since you do have a lot of sound knowledge, this is a little off topic, but what does remastering mean? Like, what exactly is happening when an album gets remastered?
Yeah, totally. So essentially, what is I'm trying to think the concisest way to put this. So essentially, once an album is done and put out there, we know it, like, this is the album, this is what it sounds like. When they go to remaster, essentially there's newer technology that's come along. So they take all the old tapes. Essentially, these were reels or tapes, depending on how it was, at what point in time this was put together. This was probably on tape, and there was probably a master version, which is like, this is the version we put out. That they then, there's like a cleaning process to go through to kind of crisp up some of the sounds, make it feel more, I don't want to say contemporary, but like crisper and clearer. So like if you listen to the album now, like if you were to buy the album now, you would probably get one of the remasters, and it would stand up to essentially anything you would listen to today on the radio. It's just as crisp and clear. The older version, not so much. There's some age and some wear to it, and you kind of hear it in the way it was recorded.
I've noticed that before, but I've never really had a language to put to it like that.
So sometimes cool. In like extreme cases, and I don't know what the remastering process was for this, but they also go through and can adjust some things, like in terms of panning, putting the guitar more to the left or vocals more to the right, or things like that are like smaller changes that can happen. It's a little harder to do with older recordings, but it's possible. I
feel like I'd be torn about remastering an album like this, though, because I feel like one of the main appeals to me of this album is it just sounds like a bunch of musicians who are really good at what they do and who all really get along well together are just sitting in a room and playing a really well-written song together. And like, there's nothing, I don't know, like it's sort of like an untouched quality to it.
Absolutely. I mean, and they also were kind of, I don't want to say pioneering, because they probably weren't. Other people were probably doing this. But if you listen to the album, some of the recording techniques and the way it's mixed are so interesting. And in terms of even simple things as panning. So like if you listen to Will You Love Me Tomorrow, you can hear James Taylor on his guitar very clearly on the left side. And you hear the backup vocals more on the right. And there's like some interesting like spatial things they were playing with that is very popular now. But at a time when things were being put out very much in mono, and like this is like, here's what it is. It's all one track coming out the same left and right. It was just some interesting things that they were doing.
Immersive, like makes it more immersive in a way, and you don't even realize that you're being immersed in it.
Yeah, totally.
I need to give you some points real quick. I think you this little lesson, this little mini brief on like music recording is super valuable for this pod. Let me just say, I'm glad this is happening.
Okay.
I'm glad this is happening. This is valuable. So you are the remaster, and I'm going to give you 3.5 remaster scrubs. That's what you get. You get the scrubbing process from the remaster.
Oh, I love that.
So
I love that.
You get 3.5 remaster scrubs.
I think you should also throw in a reel to reel there. Because, but spell it REAL, because he's the real deal.
All right, I'll give you 2 whopping reel to reels.
Love it. Thank you.
So you see how scientific the system is.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is great.
Yeah.
I would also say to the point you made earlier about it sounding like musicians just kind of at the top of their game, just all in a room with a well-made song. Like it's so interesting to me to thinking about like who played on this album and who sang on this album, because it's James Taylor and Joni Mitchell who are on guitar and backup vocals, and it's like that's just wild, right? Like like you have Joni Mitchell singing wild. Backup. What?
I didn't know she was allowed to do that.
Right? Yeah.
Oh wait, have all 3 of them gotten the presidential medal now? Because Joni Mitchell just got it. I feel like Carole King and James Taylor must have gotten it.
I know Carole King.
I know Carole did, and I'm sure James.
I'm sure James Taylor would have had to, right? Like
it's James Taylor. Yeah. You know, I love I love the whole Laurel Canyon thing. I'm sure it was kind of like weird, and like that whole scene of like Neil Young and all those dudes. Like, it's just, there's something, those are those like kind of artistic convergings that they're like markers in our like cultural history. And so it's fun to think about. It's fun to think about the energy that must have been in that, in Laurel Canyon at that time. No, obviously this is a very popular era of study, but I think as somebody who didn't really think about it a ton before really interfacing with this album, you really get a sense of what it was like to be there.
Oh, totally. And I think what's also interesting to me is that, like, you think about all three of those artists who in their own right are like fantastic artists doing their own solo work and stuff, and could be like, and literally were top of their game, but like the fact that they're all like, yeah, let's just do an album together, and these are your songs, but I'll play guitar on this and I'll sing backup. Like the collaborative nature of the music scene, especially that time, is just, I don't know, there's just something super interesting about it.
Were you exposed to those other artists, those other like Laurel Canyon artists, at the same time as you were, Carole?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say James Taylor probably played in our house more than Carole King did. My mom was big on country and folk, and this kind of had a nice little like line of country and or indie or whatever they wanted to call it at the time, because I don't know, there's like I don't know that I would put folk? I don't know that I would put James Taylor in a specific like this is your genre, but like it was a lot of that growing up, and so I was very familiar with James Taylor. I didn't learn that he played on this album until many years later. But still,
I think unfortunately, I think a lot of the time, James and Carole, maybe not so much Joni. Joni's a little more out and out folk. I think James and Carole get relegated to easy listening. Amount.
Or adult contemporary.
Which I'm like, it's not to say that those aren't legit. It's not to say that those aren't legit things, but there is there's like a connotation to that, I think. When some people classify in that way.
Right. Well, I mean, like you look on Spotify now, and I'm pretty sure Tapestry falls under, it's listed as like easy listening. And that feels weird to me. What does that mean?
I'm not sure what it means. It's not really like, do you put Steely Dan in that category as well? And that's more like yacht rock kind of, like Doobie Brothers. Are they that way?
See, and this is the thing, like all these different categories for music, like, the music nerd in me, of course appreciates that, because, who doesn't love to make lists and categories? But like, I mean, let's be honest about like an album like Tapestry. It feels like it sort of defies genre in some ways.
True.
I mean, it's just, there are songs on this that I think people, I mean, I'm sure there are people, if they heard us, I bet most people would be able to recognize at least half this album, even if they were born like 10 years ago. I'm willing to bet, because the songs have just
ubiquitous.
They've become part of the culture, and to call something easy listening, like that sounds to me like I'd be like, you'd only hear it in the elevator of a hotel or something like that.
Hey, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to hearing Carole King in the elevator. I'm not gonna lie.
No, me neither. It fits any situation. It's like a one size fits all emotion. Like there's an emotion, like there's something about the universality. I mean, this is like maybe an overarching topic of discussion for this whole pod that I hope kind of comes up with everybody we talk about, but like the role with which universality plays into the stuff that we appreciate, does that not make it specific? Because you also want your art to be specific. And I do feel like this album is specific and yet also universal in its scope. If that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. So
I'm not sure if one sort of like cancels out the other. I don't think so. Almost anyone could have felt the emotions that are in this album. Does that not make it her personal story? I don't know. Because I feel her story. I feel her story in this album for sure.
Do you think that this album defines your musical taste, Damien?
I mean, now that I hear Tyler put it that way in terms of its universality and like also its specificity and how it breaks form in some ways, I do actually. I mean, I have such a I will very happily say I have a weird taste in music, and then I have a very broad taste in music, and there are a lot of things I like to listen to that don't feel like they go together. But I feel like something like this sits in the middle of genres, and to me that feels like a lot of the stuff I listen to, if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. It totally does, because and it's also something that like when you can feel exactly where your like scope of taste is, then it's just sort of like well, where does that land and overlap with other people, and that's where the interesting stuff happens.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to have a diverse palette, because then you can speak a lot of different languages.
And like there are some albums that like I'll listen to if I'm in like certain moods or whatever, but to me like this album feels like any time of day, no matter what, it's just a comfort.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like there's like a nice,
absolutely,
it feels like it kind of like wraps around you in an interesting way.
Mm-hmm. The other connotation there about easy listening is that it's not challenging. Like it doesn't require effort to listen to it. And I think that the comfort that you feel from this, and I definitely feel from it too, it doesn't make it challenging. But then when you really listen to the songs, it's like they're dealing with very legitimate emotions that can be challenging if you really ask yourself those questions. So it's sort of like,
yeah,
it ain't easy.
Like in some ways, the music is working opposite of what the lyrics are doing, which is why it feels like such a complex and interesting album that like you discover new things every time you listen.
Are you someone who's drawn, I guess with this album specifically, are you drawn to music first or lyrics first, or are they inseparable?
I feel like they're inseparable, especially with this album. Like I feel like, I don't know, I feel like honing in on one and not the other with this album, you very much don't get the whole story. And I think that like there are some albums where like you could just listen to the music and have a good time and that's fine, or just listen to the lyrics and think about it. But I feel like this, like they both it just feels like they have to go together.
I see what you mean about that, because there might be something to get back to the kind of mastering and the technical side of things. There might be something to, I don't know why, but when I listen to this record, I really feel the vocals and the music underneath it that feel on an equal level. And it's not to say that isn't like all music, like that there is something, like that's the goal of all music recording. But in whatever way my body can feel that there is something that is equal in force to both the music, the instrumental music, and the vocal music in this album.
I mean, thinking on that track as well, if you were to listen to just the music with no lyrics, there's a chance it could feel dated. And I don't mean that in terms of like the actual melodic ideas, but just in some of the way it's recorded. You listen to the sound of the piano and it's very clearly an acoustic piano. And that's something that is hard to come by nowadays in terms of in like actual band recordings. But the lyrics feel like they could have been written like today. And it feels like it's still relevant.
Is Neil Young folk? Where
it depends on the album, I think, because I mean, when he was with Crosby, Stills,
pretty folky.
Well, he was with Crosby, Stills, and Nash for a hot second. I think that didn't go well, but I don't know the whole story. But it's
a couple good songs came out of that CSNY though.
My parents listened to Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young, and sometimes without Young, like all the time growing up. But at the same time, like I mean, Rockin' in the Free World. I mean, he recorded an album with all of Pearl Jam minus Eddie Vedder.
Right.
Like, so there's wasn't he known for? I mean, hasn't he smashed a few guitars in his day on stage?
I'm sure.
So.
I'm pretty sure he did. I think sometimes he would get really pissed off and just like slam his guitar on stage and then just like end the show early. So,
but this is also a thing, because I would even say that when we're talking Carole's music, and especially in the way that she plays it, is like she plays these songs like a rock artist. Like she plays these songs like a classic rock artist. Because that's who she was writing those songs for, basically. Like she might have brought the tempo down, but she still performs them in that way.
I mean, perfect example. I Feel the Earth Move. Listen to the way that piano really rocks out. Like that is, you can't listen to that and say that's not rock music.
It's gotta be.
Well, this actually feels like a good time for us to listen to a song from Tapestry. So, Damien, what song have you chosen as your standout track from the album?
Will You Love Me Tomorrow is my standout track.
This is a good one. Yeah.
Any particular reason why, or is it just good?
I mean, it's a fantastic song, but this is one of the ones from the album that has always stuck with me. Like this is the one I keep coming back to, and will listen to on its own with no problem. There's something really interesting in the whole thing, in the writing, in the way James Taylor is playing guitar on this. Again, Joni Mitchell singing backup on this. That's still wild to me, but like it's such a well-made song. And also it's a song that she wrote with her ex-husband and I believe for somebody else. And then this is her chance to kind of sing it and claim it as her own, which I think is super interesting, which she does with some other songs in the album as well. But like this one to me always felt like, I don't know, there was just something that just stuck with me.
Well, let's give it a listen.
That's the end of part 1. If you access this episode via our YouTube playlist, you're about to hear our guest's standout track. If you'd like to jump ahead to part 2, you'll find a link in the description of this episode.